Hello again, Guyana, and welcome to another edition of Conversations in State. I am Malika Ramsey. Thank you so very much for joining us. The last time we met, we spoke with Professor Suresh Narayan, and of course, he is the director of the Institute of Applied Science and Technology. Most of you know it as IAST. The reason I'm reminding you is, again, to also remind you that Conversations in State is a program that focuses on those agencies and departments that fall within the Ministry of the Presidency, of course, all in the name of giving you information on their purpose and functions. Today, it is my pleasure to be focusing on the Gaming Authority. That's one of the organizations, in this case, authorities, that fall within, in terms of its functions, not physically, but in terms of its functions within the Ministry of the Presidency. To remind you, some of those other organizations and departments include the Department of Climate Change, Department of Citizenship. There is also Public Service, Environment, IAST, and as we continue in the coming weeks with Conversations in State, you'll learn more about all of those agencies. It is my pleasure today to be focusing on the Gaming Authority and to talk about the Gaming Authority and its purposes and functions. I have in studio with me Miss Christine King. She is the director of the Gaming Authority. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
All right, great to have you. And of course, she's accompanied by Lloyd Moore, Mr. Lloyd Moore, who is the Chief Executive Officer, CEO of the Gaming Authority. Welcome to you, sir.
Thank you, Malika.
Let's talk about the Gaming Authority. This is not an authority or an agency that's in the news often. So people will want to know and want to be reminded of its functions. What is the purpose of the Gaming Authority?
Okay. Before I just go straight to the functions, let us look at the reason or the rationale behind the setting of the Gaming Authority. Prior to 2007, gaming and gambling in Guyana came under what we call the Gambling Prevention Act 902, which basically indicated that gambling was restricted in Guyana, except for those that were catered for under that act. In 2007, that act was amended, and that amendment saw the inclusion of sections 27 to 33, which paved the way for licensed casinos and licensed casino operations to become lawful, and for the establishment of the Gaming Authority.
Okay.
This, in fact, did occur in 2008. In 2008, the minister responsible at that time made regulations to have the Gaming Authority established and to set out prescribed fees that had to be paid by persons who wanted to set up casino operations. In fact, it was on the 31st of October 2008 when the regulation came into being. And the regulations for the fees came into being on the 10th of November of the same year.
The same year.
So these regulations actually stipulated the composition, the form, the functions, and the responsibilities of the Gaming Authority. At the same time, it sets out the type of licenses that we could have issued, it set out the fees that had to be paid, and also the financial obligations of the holders of casino operation licenses.
Okay. In anything you do, any organization, there would have been challenges before all of this. Do you find that since you've had the amendments and so on, and the new additions, that it has helped the authority to run somewhat smoothly? Smoother than it was running before?
No, you see, the amendment is what put the Gambling Authority in place. Prior to that, there was
nothing at all.
There's a law, but there's no Gambling Authority. So basically, this allowed for there to be an authority that can regulate. Let me go a little bit further.
Sure.
In 2009, with the enactment of what we call the Anti-Money Laundering and Counter Financing of Terrorism Act, let's say the AML-CFT for short, Act of 2009, what we saw happen is that the Gaming Authority now became a supervisory body for casinos in Guyana, which means that we had to ensure that they were compliant with the Act, which is the AML-CFT Act. It took us to another level. And basically, it saw the Gaming Authority taking on a role much more than just that was intended initially. As we go forward with the discussions, I will examine and explain exactly how that affected the way in which we operate.
All right. I know in terms of running the Gaming Authority, directors are necessary. Ms. King, would you like to talk about the new board of directors?
Yes, but before I do, I think I'd like to talk about the mission of the authority. The mission, as Mr. Moore said, it's a body that regulates gaming in Guyana. So our intention as a board is to provide effective leadership and regulatory oversight of gaming in Guyana for the growth and development of a lucrative industry that supports the national economy. So we're not just giving license for gaming and so on. We're trying to ensure that at least the Gaming Authority contributes to the national economy.
To the economy. Okay.
And our vision too is to position Guyana as a leading and international recognized jurisdiction with a well-managed and effectively regulated gaming industry.
In terms of feedback, and I'm happy that you did talk about Guyana being a recognized jurisdiction, have you been able to get feedback maybe from outside of Guyana in terms of people not only recognizing the Gaming Authority, but every operation that would fall under the Gaming Authority?
Well, we've been in touch with a number of agencies abroad, Jamaica. Recently, we met with some people in St. Lucia. We've been meeting with people so that at the level of the board, we can be better prepared to be able to deal with the issues that confront us.
Right.
We recognize the need for training.
Okay.
Board members have had some training, and we intend to have ourselves better equipped. We intend for the staff to be trained as well, because this is something new to us, and we cannot be doing our work groping in the dark. It's important that we properly equip them, have the right tools to do our work.
Okay, great. Let's talk about the directors now, if you want to.
No, the directors, we were appointed in April 2016, the new board, and the chairman of the board is Mr. Royce Ford. He's an attorney at law. The secretary is Mrs. Peter Chandan Edmonds. She's also an attorney at law. Mr. George Vaughn, he's an accountant, and yours truly.
Viewers, to remind you, especially those of you who missed it at the beginning, Ms. King is the director.
Yes, so, well, we were sworn in 2016, and since then we've had several meetings. We have our usual statutory meeting, but we meet ever so often as is necessary to address different issues that relate to the Gaming Authority. Initially, we had no home. We had a small office that within a month we were asked to vacate. So we had no home. We are now housed at South Road. We have a building there in South Road next to iPad. And we also saw the need to appoint a competent chief executive officer. We advertised, we interviewed quite a few persons, and we eventually got Mr. Moore.
Okay.
We also advertised for a compliance officer, for an accountant, for an admin officer. And so we have those on board. But of course we need other staff, and from time to time we'll be seeing our advertisements in the news. We want to be sure that we have the best, because I think I shouldn't say I think the board is concerned that whatever we do is above board.
Yes.
And that we follow all the regulations that are before us before we make the decisions that we have to make.
Okay. This is for both of you. Mr. Moore, CEO Moore, you spoke about the establishment and so on of the Gaming Authority. Ms. King, you talked about the mission statement. At this point, because unfortunately, and we were just discussing this before we went on air, and unfortunately, sometimes these organizations, again in this case the Gaming Authority, you only hear about or you focus on certain organizations when there's a negative put out there. How would you, apart from the establishment and the mission statement, how would you encourage the public or let the public know that really and truly Gaming Authority is a very important body in our society to ensure that everything is above board and so on? What would you say to people who still have, a kind of a standoffish or a negative thing? What really is this authority?
Well, it's the intention of the board. Well, as I said, the new board members were sworn in April 2016, and since then we had a lot of work to do. But among the things we plan to do is to have effective PR. It's important, we feel, to have information shared with the public. I think the CEO might be able to tell you more, because there's a plan for us to go to the various regions, to have some multi-stakeholder meetings to help people to understand who we are. And I guess there will be other things that we can do, flyers, maybe some public announcements. But we intend to involve the public, let them know who we are. Because, of course, people hear about gaming, and they want to know what gaming is.
Yes.
So you have to explain. And I may explain to you, but then there are others out there who would really like to know what gaming is. And so there's a need for us to have proper public relations.
And then, unfortunately, most times us, if I can refer to us as coastlanders, we try to, in our minds, we put everything into Region 4,
Yes.
even if not Region 4 in Central Georgia at least. So, there is a need indeed to take it outside of our region. CEO Moore.
I just add a bit to that, right? What we've recognized since what I've recognized since coming on board, I've listened to what the directors have got to say in our meetings, to understand the direction in which they want to take the authority, to understand the nuances of where we need to be. So that effect for 2018, in the planning of the budget, we have established a few programs. One of the major programs for next year is what we call the Stakeholders Engagement Forum, in which we'll be having discussions with the public, John public, and other stakeholders on issues that relates to gambling, in particular when it comes to responsible gambling or gaming and harm minimization, the harms that can come from gambling. We have to address it. It's the largest part of what we propose for in the budget. Okay? Because we've recognized from studies that have been done overseas, because sadly to say, right, I have not as yet seen a study that was done of gambling in Guyana. I've seen studies done for other countries and for other areas. Those studies have guided us to understand that we need to have a program that makes the public fully aware of every aspect of gaming and gambling, so that when persons go there to game or to gamble, they can do so responsibly, and they can understand that there's certain things they can do to minimize any harm to themselves or family in the course of gaming or gambling.
It's interesting that you're saying that, you haven't yet seen any official studies done on gambling. So as is right now, we're going on basically, and I know nothing is wrong with that, but are we basically going on what we've observed in society in terms of the gaming sector?
No. This is a sad thing about it that happens now these days. Today, events, we are now catching up with events.
Okay.
Gaming and the different forms of gaming are here. They're here in Guyana. They've come from other jurisdiction, but they're here in Guyana today. The problem that we have is that they're unregulated. In some cases, some people would say they're unlawful. And why they would say it's unlawful is because in Guyana, what we have is a gambling prevention act. We don't have a gaming act. We don't have a gambling act. Okay? So then you can look at the intent of the then framers to say that what they wanted to do was to prevent all forms of gambling in Guyana, with the exception of those which they expressly placed into the act.
So just to make it clear, because it can be a bit confusing, those amendments that you talked about earlier added to, or should I say, did that somewhat change the Gambling Prevention Act?
Yes, it changed the entire scenario. It allowed now for casino gambling to become legal. Now, here's where we have, sometimes we walk into a bit of murky water, but the water is not really murky. There's a mud at the bottom and there's clear water at the top. But there's some people who just kick in the mud up to make it look murky. But when it settles again, there'll be clear water at the top and there'll be the mud at the bottom. Right? Basically what we find happening here is that a number of new forms of gaming and gambling has entered our society. And they're being operated unregulated. We have now got to do either one of two things. Right? We've either got to go after them with the law, find the necessary, manpower to be able to close them down or do whatever we have to do them, or we regulate them. We have a choice. Okay? The much more efficient thing to do, in my opinion, is to regulate. To regulate for those which are acceptable to society, or which can be accepted by society, and to ensure that those that are not acceptable are kept to the minimum, that we restrict them as far as we possibly can. Okay? So, it's not a question of us making a law to just bring something in. These things are already here. All these forms of gaming are here. And we now have to ensure that we can have them regularized.
Okay, all right, great. Viewers, if you're now tuning in, this is our second edition of Conversations in State. And for those of you who missed it earlier, Conversations in State is designed to focus on those agencies, authorities, departments that function in a sense, not necessarily physically, but within the Ministry of the Presidency. And the idea is to give information and to remind you of the purposes that these agencies and so on serve, not necessarily a confrontational one. I think that we have enough negatives out there. This program does not need to add to the negatives. On the note of negatives, though, as a gaming authority, there are possible challenges that could come up in terms of for the directors, for the CEO, and so in terms of the functions. In your minds, even without revealing too much, do you have a way that you would want to deal with these challenges that would come? For example, let me give an example. People who may go back to being against gambling and being against any form of gambling in Guyana, which would bring into the act that we talked about earlier.
Okay, like I said to you, next year one of the largest programs that we plan to have is the stakeholders, what we call the awareness program, which will go out and speak to people.
Including religious bodies.
Yes, religious body have their duty to perform. We cannot go against that. It is their duty to preach against, to advise against things that they feel are not wholesome or not with keeping with their belief. They have a right and a duty, and that must never be stopped. That is the balance that keeps any society going. Let's look at it this way. If I may steal a little bit from the good book, it was Christ who said, "Render to Caesar what is Caesar, and unto God what is God." We live in a world where there are issues that deals with our religion, and the issues that are of the world. We cannot remove ourselves from that. Here's where we live. Okay? There are people who will live for their religious belief, and there are other people who will live for the world. We have the two, and we need to balance it. Okay, so the religious persons will speak, we will have to listen, and they will have to understand at sometimes where we stand. Again, I want you something again from the good book. Let's look at Joseph. Child of God, son of Israel. but he was a ruler in Egypt. They were not people of God, but he was made a ruler there. And what he brought to Egypt is something which we are supposed to bring to gambling in Guyana, or the game in Guyana. He brought the grace that is necessary, the understanding that is necessary to ensure that if persons are going to play or be in a game, that it's done in a fair and above board manner.
Exactly.
That is what we're here for. We're here to ensure that any form of gaming or gambling is done in Guyana is done responsibly, is done fairly. We do not care who you are. Once you meet the criteria that have been set out under the law, we will ensure that you are licensed to do what you have to do. And we will monitor you for compliance under every single act that has been set out that we are responsible for.
Okay.
We will ensure we will not back off of any issues when it comes to that.
Okay.
And as I speak here, I'm very emotional when it comes to that part of our work. I see things in a strict way, this way. Laws are made for people, not people for laws. If a law becomes obsolete or it's unfair, then you either repeal it, amend it, or you change it. Once it's a law, we adhere to it. It's a simple process.
And to add to what was just said, I think from the outset we're prepared for the challenge. We know that sometimes we had to deal with some challenges, and we've been following what has been happening in the news ever since the Gaming Authority came into existence. So we are aware that some people will object. We are aware that some people will expect us to turn a blind eye and do what they would want us to do.
Yes.
But as the CEO said, we intend to operate above board, and we intend to observe the laws. Right? That's our mission. That's what we'll do. And as long as people understand that, I don't think we have a problem.
No problem. Okay. As you prepare to condition your minds for the stakeholders meeting that you talked about that is going to happen next year, how has the sector of itself, as I may be wrong here and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's still a small sector in terms of the gaming sector, how has it responded so far? And again, this is even without going into too much of the controversial stuff and so on. How has the sector of itself responded?
Yeah, it's an emerging sector in India. It's emerging. It's at its beginning stages.
Okay.
Okay, so I always say if you're going to have something, have the best. Learn from the best. Take the best and do the best. So we'll have to ensure the practices that we put in place are the best practices. We need to look at countries who have put in place practices that are, what should I say, that has given them the better results in terms of gaming. And it's not going to be easy. I think it's because it's very costly to put in place some of the measures that they have put in place. But it's going to ensure that operations operate within the mandate that has been set for us. It will take a lot of will for us to be able to do what we have to do in the way in which it's supposed to be done. Okay. And that's all I can say at this moment.
At this moment. All right. You talked about the fact that it is still an emerging sector. Do you anticipate, even with all of the plans, you both spoke about even the board of directors and so on, do you anticipate quick growth in that sector?
Well, because of regulations, people have to follow procedure.
Okay.
And that takes time.
Okay.
There's certain things that are required in order for people to get licensing. That will take some time. So I'm not sure about the quick. But yes, it will catch on. And we'll have applications coming in for proper licensing. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm sure the amount of information you both gave today has given the viewers a good idea about what the Gaming Authority is. But we just have about 2 more minutes left before we have to wrap up today's conversation. And I will give both of you an opportunity to leave, in the minds of the public positive things, even though our conversation was indeed a positive one. Just an opportunity to leave some wrap-up sentiments with our viewers regarding the Gaming Authority, beginning with you, Ms. King.
The Gaming Authority is, as I said earlier, it's a regulatory body.
Mm-hmm.
It's not here to drive fear into anyone.
Okay.
It is just set up to do what is right. All right? We really don't want to be, I don't think any of us in the Gaming Authority would want to be seen as dealing with anything that is unlawful or illegal. It's just for the enjoyment and leisure of the persons who would like to do gaming. And so I'd like to say as a board member that anyone who's interested in applying for license to be sure that they know what they have to do, and to present to us all the required documents before we can approve.
All right. Before I go to Mr. Moore, how can they get to you again? Just a reminder, because I think you did say this in the beginning of the program.
Yes, we have a telephone number here. It's oh gosh, let me see. We're on South Road, 252 South Road, Georgetown, just next to iPad, and our numbers are 225-4446 or 225-4449.
Okay. All right. Thank you. CEO.
Okay. Basically, just to add to what Ms. King said just now, our job is to ensure that once gaming comes here together, that it's done in a very safe and a well-regulated environment. We have to ensure that persons or operators within the gaming environment operate in a manner that is in keeping with the Act and the law.
Okay.
Once you do that, you're not going to have any problem with the Gaming Authority. We're here to support the operations of these persons who intend to do legitimate and, what should I say, responsible gaming in the act.
Thank you
That's all.
so very much. Unfortunately, we have to put a wrap on today's edition of Conversations in State. I would have been chatting with the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Gaming Authority, Mr. Lloyd Moore, and also Director of the Gaming Authority, one of the directors, Ms. Christine King. Of course, I am Malika Ramsey, and this has been Conversations in State. Thanks for watching.